Pan Am people called it sub-low, which is subject to load. These days they call it non-rev, where you don't, if there's not a seat available, you don't get a seat. So they figured out all these ways to get there. So now we're in Rome, April 2nd. In the morning, we took a tour. We saw Moses by Michelangelo. Next day, we took a tour. And in the morning, this is Sunday, and in the morning, we saw St. Peter's and had the Pope's blessing. The next day, we went to Tivoli Gardens, and as Claire says, we saw a great many fountains. Next sentence, I lost my camera. Okay, so then we took the train to Florence, and so April 6th, Claire says, my brother got lost for 2 hours. Well, that's true, I did. For some reason, I decided that I was going to leave the hotel by myself without telling Mom and Dad. I told Claire, but and I was going out to get a present for Mom for something. It wasn't her birthday, I don't know what it was, but I decided I would leave, so I did. And I got lost. I think really what happened is I forgot the name of the hotel. So now Mom and Dad, of course, are going crazy trying to find their 8-year-old wandering around in Italy. So a couple hours later, I've actually found a street, and I think I can see the hotel down there, and I see my dad about a block away, making a beeline for me, and I go, this isn't going to be good. But he was really good about it. He basically said, don't ever do that again. So we had that adventure in the morning. In the afternoon, we went on a tour. So now we've gone to Naples, and for those of you that have been to Italy, Naples, Sorrento, Capri, all gorgeous places, we didn't know the difference. We're 8 years old. But Claire says, Mother turned her ankle. Well, she sprained her ankle pretty badly, I guess, and so we put her in the hospital. And Claire and Dad and I went around and did all this stuff, and we went back. We went back on the 18th from Sorrento, got Mother out of the hospital, and went back to Sorrento. Okay, so now it's time to go from Italy back home to England. So this is on April 21st. Claire says, we went on a train to Naples and then on to Rome. Took Pan American to Paris and then took Air France to London. The end. So that's pretty much what our life was like for 5 years over there, except for the last year, which I'll get into here in a second. But we had a lot of great trips. I remember a driving trip one time. Dad had taken his 51 Plymouth from San Francisco to London.
Okay.
Don't ask me why, but I guess Pan Am was paying for it, so he said, well, we need a car over there, so let's take the Plymouth.
You didn't have the steering wheel on the car?
No, it did not, so that was a bit of a challenge. So we took that, we drove to the east coast of England, and then got on a ferry and went to Norway, and drove around there and Scandinavian countries, much as we did a couple of years ago. So that was a good trip. But probably the best trip, the most memorable to me, is when Claire and I got to go with Dad on I think it was a 10-day trip with Pan Am. He was the captain of the flight, and somehow he talked Mom into letting us go without her. I don't know how that worked, were happy to go. So we went to every place we went. Of course, he made sure there were seats on the airplane because, by God, his kids were going to go with him. You know? So we went to Munich, Calcutta, Bombay, Karachi, Beirut, turned around and came back the opposite way. It took us about 10 days to do that. In those days when, as I alluded to, the planes were a lot slower, so you know, if you flew 5 or 6 hours, you probably got somewhere and spent a day or two. A little more relaxed atmosphere back then. So we had a lot of good times on that trip. I remember Claire and I going fishing with Dad in Beirut, and just in a little wooden boat. Caught a shark that was only about this big, but the guy insisted on bringing it aboard, and it's doing this stuff. Anyway, and then Claire and I managed to get in Karachi, we managed to get the Indian version of Montezuma's Revenge. In spite of Dad warning us multiple times, do not eat anything that you don't know where it came from. Well, okay. We each had a carton of milk, which I think we're pretty sure we got it on the airplane, and for whatever reason it was bad, and we got sicker than a dog. So we ended up in a convalescent place overnight, with the nurses running around in the little starched hats and all that stuff. So poor Dad, he has to leave the next day. He's taking this flight. There's nobody there that's going to take him but him. So he's going crazy trying to figure out what to do with us and get us well enough so we could go. Because he was imagining what was going to happen if he went all the way back to London. He reported to my mother that I left Claire and Toby in India. No big deal. So anyway, we got well enough and continued on. Somewhere in that trip, I think on the way back, we took off out of Bombay in the DC-6, and Claire and I were sitting together, and we're looking out the window, and all of a sudden we see one of those big old propellers start windmilling down and stop, and all this oil is gushing down the side of the engine, and we're sort of looking at each other, but we knew Dad was flying the airplane. We were going to be fine, no big deal. So pretty soon Dad comes on the PA and says, we've had a little engine problem, and we're going to just go back and get it fixed, which we did. I think it took us a couple hours. They must have just tightened up some fittings, threw some more oil in there, and we were on our way. So that was a great trip. Mom was relieved to see us back in one piece. So we did that. We lived outside of London for 4 years. And then in the last year, we knew we were going home at the end of the 5th year. So we moved into London proper itself so we could go to a place called the American School in London and become Americanized. So we wouldn't come home and talk like this, People would wonder where we've been, So we got all fixed up that way and came back to California. So it's a long way of saying this, but this is where Claire got her love of travel and flying and most things British and the British people. She really loved them. Okay, so now I'm going into 8th grade. Claire is a sophomore in high school. We did that thing, and then she went off to college at Whitman in Washington State. I was at home for a couple of years, and for the next, lot of years, we were like this. We were never around each other except for, vacations, that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean we weren't close. We stayed in pretty close touch, and I would go and see her occasionally. I was in the Navy, and I could get an airplane, and I flew out here a couple of times to see her, and I would land at Williams Air Force Base out here. And then she was in Illinois getting her master's degree, and I flew up there one weekend, spent some time with her, and she also came down to Jacksonville, Florida, where I was, and so we stayed pretty close, but not as close as we could have been. One of the many things I loved about Claire was she was always where Santa Claus was going to be. Early on, of course, we were with the folks, and then when I was in Dallas, and Susan and of course Jenny was in her Santa Claus years, and Claire would always come and stay with us and be there for Christmas morning. And when we moved to Prescott, she would come up to see us, usually for Thanksgiving.